All right, now we're going to take this circle and apply value to it using just our pencil to make this turn into a sphere, so a three-dimensional shape. So we're adding value to make it have form, which are two of our elements. So we should have practiced doing that value scale before, where we're taking our pencil really lightly and gradually building it to dark and practicing making it light. We can trace around something to get our circle. The next thing is, where is our light coming from? Is our light coming from over here? Is it up here? Is it over on this side? I'm going to just put a little X where my light source is. Okay. So I know if my light source is on here, I'm going to have a spot that stays white. Okay, because that's where all the light is hitting. So that's called a highlight. Okay, so highlight is the lightest part, shadow is the darkest part, and that's going to be underneath our form. Okay, from this highlight, we can start making bands that show us kind of how this is going to transition. So it's going to be white there, it's going to get a little darker here, and I'm drawing the bands really light because obviously I don't necessarily want to see them. So it gets a little darker there. Right now it kind of looks like an avocado. You want your bands to follow the curve of your sphere. Now, a lot of people make the mistake of this area here being the darkest. Okay? It's true that this is going to be darker than, let's say, up here, but it's not as dark as this line right here. That line's probably the darkest area. Then it begins to get a little lighter as you come out of it. And the reason for that is this light source is hitting, let's say, a table that this ball is sitting on, and that light reflects back in. So this area is dark, it's just not necessarily the darkest area. And then we're going to put a shadow underneath it that is the darkest. I don't like to start with the shadow because then my hand is in the darkest part and smearing. That's when you get pencil all the way over. So I'm going to start with the lightest area and work my way to dark because it's always easier to make something darker, but it's hard to make a dark area that's too dark lighter. Now this first area, it's going to be extremely light. I'm barely touching my pencil to the page. It may not even show up on camera very well. And I may even take a kneaded eraser or even just a regular eraser and tap into it to make it go even a little lighter. A 2B pencil, we use those a lot, but there's a full range of pencils you could use. So professional artists, if they were doing this, might be starting with a pencil that's labeled an H. A 2B is a nice soft lead without being too soft. So there's a 4B, or 5B even, or even 6B that are really soft. So they would get darker areas filled in more. All right, as I approach that line, I'm going to start overlapping back into that area. And pressing a little bit more. I like to go around in circles. I just feel like it allows me to blend a little bit better. All right, so now I'm to my next line. Again, I'm going to start by overlapping and get pressing a little bit harder. I can always turn my paper. Ooh, that got really dark right there. Kind of hit down to my next area. This next area should be my darkest. Remember, we're getting close to the edge. So again, I'm going to overlap because we don't want these to look like bands. You want it to just look like it gradually goes from dark to light. The pencil almost needs sharpened again. And different pencils, even though they say 2B, depending on who makes them, will give you different results. So the plastic coated pencils, like the pencils you get for birthday parties and stuff, usually have a little harder lead than what technically is a 2B. So it's going to appear a little bit more scratchy. Another helpful tip is when you're doing stuff like that is to take a tissue and put it under your hand so you're not smearing and not getting it on your hand. And then I'm going to start getting a little bit lighter because I'm coming around. It's not white. It's just not as dark as that band. Okay. And so now my sphere is starting to take shape. You can see the bands. So we're going to work on smoothing those out a bit. So I'm going to take a tissue and wrap it around my finger and go in little circles to kind of smooth one area into the next. If you've ever bought a pencil kit, sometimes they have what looks like a wrapped piece of paper, like a really tightly wrapped piece of paper does the same thing, called blending nubs. For elementary level, I think a tissue is plenty though. So it's starting to take shape. I feel like maybe I got a little dark up in here. So again, I could take a kneaded eraser. I could just take the eraser on my pencil and just kind of tap and pull out to the side. So we don't want to necessarily erase it completely. We just want to soften it a little bit. We want to watch that we're staying in the circle, that I'm not smearing stuff out to the sides this way. Now, some people like the look of the pencil and don't like the smooth look, and that's okay either. Artists usually find their own preference. And then one of the things, I don't like how harsh this looks, so is adding the shadow. The shadows always really make things pop a little bit more. So we know if our light source is over here, our shadow is going to be down here and to the opposite side. So there's ways that you can mathematically do this with our light source where you kind of take your edges of your sphere and that gives you the size of your shadow. Shadows are elongated versions of your shape. So an elongated version of a sphere would be an oval. And ours is going to fall off of the page here just because of where I placed it. Now for a shadow, it's going to be darkest right up underneath that sphere. So you can already see that that sphere is starting to lift forward a little bit. And then the shadow, depending on what kind of day it is, how close your light source is to your object, so you can play with this outside as well, different times of day. What does your shadow look like? If you go out at noon, your shadow is really hard, but it's right underneath you. If you go out at 4 p.m., your shadow is going to be leaning a little bit more to one side. If you go out at 6 p.m., you might still have a little bit of a shadow if we still have sunlight at 6 p.m. But it's probably a very, very, very soft shadow. So photographers use that concept as well to plan when the best time to do photo shoots are, because you don't want really dark, harsh shadows on people. Again, I can smooth out that a little bit. And you can see that sphere now has kind of come alive. It's pulling off the page a little bit. My camera isn't kind of catching as much of the subtlety that's in here, but this is a great way for you to start practicing getting value. And then this applies to anything that you want to appear 3D. So if you were drawing a hot chocolate mug, it's going to have that rounded form that goes back in space.